Does anybody know Get Up, Stand Up? It's one of Bob Marley's very early pieces, and you hear the guitar and the bass. And Bob Marley has now lost it, you know what I mean? You don't have it no more, but this is when he had it.
Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. By 1999, music critics and historians had concluded that the greatest musicians of the 20th century were the likes of Michael Jackson for pop music, Bob Marley for reggae, and the Beatles for rock. Bob Marley, to all of his fans, had reached his utmost peak at the time of his death. He had evolved from a teenage car singer with his group to the eventual roots reggae megastar, a passionate singer and incredible songwriter with a phenomenal band that all rolled up together made up a musical machine that was, by the time of his passing, sharper than the finest katana blade. That's why I found the remarks of Beatles member John Lennon from 1980 very bewildering. Several years ago, an audio clip surfaced in which the British artist expressed his admiration for Jamaican music and Bob Marley as well. But incredibly, he went on to basically describe the tough gong as being past it and washed up. I first came across the story of that statement on a news article online. At first, I thought it was just clickbait and decided to dig a little deeper and listen to the audio clip for myself. And to my utmost shock, the clip did exist on YouTube, but I still couldn't accept what I had just heard and tried to dismiss it as an AI voice or something, until I saw that video was uploaded in 2014 when the technology didn't exist yet. As a reggae fan, I was outraged at the sacrilege. I mean, this was Bob Marley he was talking about. But after a while, I tried to be objective as possible and took a deep dive into what he really meant with that statement. So now, let's take a look at the real truth behind John Lennon's shocking critique of Bob Marley's credibility. To begin with, my first reaction was, what does John Lennon know about reggae anyway? Then I remembered that the Beatles indeed had great admiration for Jamaican sound. In fact, they recorded a song called Obladi Oblada in 1968, a really charming ska tune that was written by Paul McCartney, even though it was said that John Lennon really hated it, for reasons which aren't too clear yet. But let's not get it twisted. John Lennon was a big admirer of reggae music and Bob Marley and the Wailers, especially Bob's earlier works, and that's why I found his statement really puzzling. In the said audio from 1980, Lennon was in a studio with his band, trying to put some tunes together, and told his bassist to play something similar to what Aston Barrett had played in 1973's Get Up, Stand Up. And in the clip, he asked his assistant to fetch him a tape, I believe, that contained Get Up, Stand Up for his band to listen to and get inspired for that session. And then Lennon goes on to say how great the song was, but that Bob Marley by then had lost it and didn't have it anymore. Before he pressed play on that tape, he said this is how reggae sounded before they all got smart, just before the end of the clip. Now in simple terms, Lennon thought that 7 years after Get Up Stand Up, Bob Marley had lost his creative edge and spark. Now though I found this outrageous, I have to admit that there are many Wailers fans who believe that Bob Marley's peak was between 1968, after leaving Studio One, and the Wailers' second album for Island Records in 1973's Burning, the same period that John Lennon respected the most. The thing I found most profound about Bob Marley's earlier years is that raw, traditional reggae sound that dominated the era in which it was made. You see, those were the days before the genre had really broken into the global consciousness, as well as the radar of the big foreign record labels. That particular sound was pure, undiluted reggae music, straight from the gritty streets of Kingston, Jamaica, the archetype and what was the standard before Island Records and others began to influence the infusion of other genres of music into it. In fact, history tells us that after the initial recording of Catch a Fire at Dynamic Studios in Kingston, Chris Blackwell flew Bob Marley into the UK with the master tapes for that sound to be remastered, and that alone almost led to a falling out with the Wailers, as Island Records felt the sound was brilliant but too raw for the global audience that he was trying to market it to, and infused elements of rock instrumentals, effectively watering down the original material, at least from an instrumental point of view. Okay, but nevertheless, Catch a Fire still became the hard-hitting masterpiece that would take the world by storm and win the admiration of the Wailers' fellow musicians, John Lennon included. And now with the departures of Bonnie and Peter, Bob would rebuild his team and proceed onwards to superstar status, starting with 1974's Natty Dread and legendary status by the time Exodus hit the streets in 1977. By then, Bob's sound, instrumentally at least, was massively different from what early fans might have been used to. If there's one thing about us fans, we often stick to what drew us to an artist in the first place. And using myself as an example, I grew up on 1970s/1980s roots reggae with a sprinkling of 1990s offerings from artists like Luciano, Sizzla Kalonji and Garnet Silk. And no disrespect to the great artists out there today, mind you, but that's just my preference. The Wheelers sound that John Lennon first warmed up to and was blown away by was from the original lineup of Bob, Bonnie, Peter, the Barrett Brothers and Earl Lindo only. But the globe-conquering musical machine from 1974 would feature magnificent additions like the I3s, Tyrone Downey, Alvin Seco Patterson, Al Anderson and Junior Malvin, among others. And this would inevitably create a more robust sound with elements of soul and funk that were infused to win over new converts to reggae music, even though Bob was able to do this without compromising the roots reggae foundation of his music. I personally believe Bob's music got better with the passage of time. The Top Gun was one perfectionist who always got the absolute best from his team. By 1980, when John Lennon made that controversial remark, the Beatles had broken up, and he had morphed from the young rock-style heartthrob of 2 decades earlier to a long-haired, super-radical, anti-war activist, the one who had shunned all the trappings of superstardom around the same time that Bob Marley was cementing his place as a globally renowned superstar and icon, and with 12 incredible studio albums under his belt and a humongous and growing fan base. I've read a few opinions that suggested that Lennon was probably jealous of Bob's career and trajectory, and while I found it a very tempting idea, I'd like to think that it was just a statement by a fan who was simply stuck in a particular phase of his idol's musical development. And that being said, John Lennon was quite a character who had strong opinions about everybody and everything, and he did have lots of respect for Bob Marley, by the way. If their first meeting in 1979 is anything to go by. In late 79, Bob and his crew were hanging out at a bar in West Hollywood during the US leg of the Survival album tour. Also at the bar that night was John Lennon and superstar songwriter and producer Benny Taupin, who was Elton John's songwriter, and they would all hang out for the rest of the night. And based on Taupin's account, he and Lennon were quite in awe of Bob Marley and didn't hide their admiration at all. It was one great night that got even more legendary when Bob reached into his bag and brought out a humongous spliff that was as large as a deodorant spray can, and after they all smoked that one, those king-size spliffs kept on coming out of Bob's bag, and by the end of that night, Lennon and Taupin were so stoned that they could barely move, with both men not able to remember how they got back to their homes that night. Incidentally, Lennon was the second Beatle that Bob had met, as the Beatles' lead guitarist George Harrison had come to his dressing room backstage to hang out with the Top Gun, also in California, during the Natty Dread album tour in 1975. Though not much is known about that particular encounter, but it was said that when Bob was told that Harrison was coming to meet him, Bob excitedly whipped out a huge spliff, lit it, and welcomed him with the greeting, "Welcome, Ras Beatle." Personally, I am of the firm opinion that Bob Marley was at the peak of his powers when he passed away. His last album that was released in his lifetime, In the Magnificent Uprising, is a cathartic and passionate masterpiece of exquisite songwriting and imperious instrumentation, a musical parting gift to the world that totally rubbishes the notion that Bob Marley had lost his edge later in his career. And that is all I'm going to say. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.